The inheritance bomb, my deceased dad's secret 4D chess game against my greedy stepmother that saved our family legacy. Oh, the sheer betrayal. Imagine thinking you've been cut out, dismissed, forgotten, only to discover your deceased father, the man you thought abandoned you, was actually playing 4D chess from beyond the grave. And the look on my stepmother Diana's face when I dropped those property deeds on the table? Priceless. You want to know what the hell happened next? Let me tell you how I flipped the script on my greedy stepfamily and claimed what was rightfully mine. The call that changed everything. It was a rainy Tuesday morning in Singapore. I was neck deep in a massive real estate deal when my phone flashed with a number I hadn't seen in years. It was Grace, my childhood friend, and her voice was shattered. "Maxwell," she choked out. "Your father, he passed away last night. 5 years. That's how long it had been since I'd stepped foot in Maplewood, the small town where I grew up. 5 years since the explosive argument with my father that sent me packing, flying halfway across the world to Asia, hell-bent on making my own name in international real estate. Now I was heading home, not as the prodigal son, but as a grieving stranger. A cold welcome home the moment the taxi pulled up to that sprawling Victorian house. A flood of memories washed over me. The basketball hoop where Dad taught me to shoot, the porch swing where we'd talk business plans late into summer nights, the garden where we buried Mom when I was 10. Everything looked smaller, somehow, like my memories had inflated the proportions. Diana's silver Mercedes, along with 2 other luxury cars I didn't recognize, sat in the driveway. Dad had always preferred his old Cadillac, practical, reliable, unpretentious, just like him. Before I could even reach for the doorbell, the front door swung open. My stepsister Brittany stood there, her face a carefully composed mask of somber politeness that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Maxwell," she said flatly. "We weren't sure you'd come." "He was my father," I replied, simply. She stepped aside, and I entered the house that no longer felt like home. The foyer had been gutted, redecorated in Diana's cold, ultra-modern style, all chrome and glass, not a trace of Dad's warm woods and worn leather. Diana was holding court in the living room, surrounded by town locals I vaguely recognized. When she saw me, her perfectly painted face registered a flash of shock before quickly rearranging itself into a grieving widow's expression. "Maxwell," she cooed, rising to air-kiss my cheek. "What a surprise. We tried to reach you, of course, but your number had changed." It hadn't. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said, formally, knowing the dance we were about to perform. "When's the funeral?" I asked. "Tomorrow at 2, my stepbrother Tyler interjected, not bothering to get up from his sprawled position on an armchair. The message was crystal clear. I wasn't needed or wanted here. "Your old room is being used for storage now," Diana added, a saccharine sweetness in her tone. "But we can make up the guest room for you." I nodded, suddenly desperate to escape the weight of their hostile stares. As I turned to go, Diana's voice, honey-sweet with poison underneath, called after me. "Harold Stevenson is handling the estate matters. He'll be here in the morning to discuss some paperwork. Family only, you understand." Oh, I understood perfectly. I was being explicitly excluded from the will reading. Seeds of doubt and a hidden truth. Grace found me later, sitting on the back porch, staring at the old oak tree where Dad and I had built a treehouse when I was 8. "They've been awful, Max," she said, sitting beside me. "Since Richard got sick, they've been acting like they already own the town. Diana's been meeting with developers, talking about selling off properties. Grace had grown up next door and had stayed in Maplewood. She told me Dad's health had deteriorated rapidly in the last year, information Diana had never bothered to share. "Your dad asked about you," Grace said quietly, all the time. "He kept your international magazine features in his office." "His office is still intact?" I asked, a knot tightening in my chest. Grace corrected me. "Diana cleared it out last week. Had everything boxed up and moved to storage. She even changed the locks on the door." My mind raced. The guest room was impersonal and cold, exactly what I'd expected. As I unpacked, I heard voices in the hallway. "Once Harold confirms the will tomorrow, we can move forward with the Riverside property sale," Diana was saying. "Lawrence has already made an offer." "What about Maxwell?" Tyler asked. "Think he'll cause problems?" Diana's laugh was sharp. "What can he do? Richard left everything to us. Maxwell made his choice when he abandoned his father." I sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking with anger and grief. Dad and I had our differences, but abandoned? I'd called for months after leaving, only to have Diana tell me he was too busy or not interested. Eventually, I'd stopped trying. A father's secret plan that night, unable to sleep, I wandered the house. In the library, I found some of my old books still on the shelves. I pulled down my favorite, The Count of Monte Cristo. Dad had given it to me on my 16th birthday, inscribing it with, "To Maxwell, remember that patience and planning always win in the end." As I flipped through the yellow pages, an envelope slipped out and fell to the floor. Inside was a letter in my father's distinctive handwriting, dated just 3 months ago. "Maxwell, if you're reading this, I'm likely gone. Diana doesn't know about this letter, or the arrangements I've made. There's a safety deposit box at First National, box number 247. The key is taped to the back of the Monte Cristo painting in my office. Whatever you may think of me, know that I always had a plan. Dad! My heart pounding, I made my way to Dad's office. The door was locked, just as Grace had said. But I remember the loose floorboard in the hallway where Dad always kept his spare key. Some things never change. Inside, the room had been stripped bare. No papers, no books, no personal items. But the painting still hung on the wall. I carefully removed it, finding the small key exactly where Dad said it would be. Tomorrow, I decided, I would visit the bank in Harold Stevenson's office. It was time to find out exactly what my father had been planning. The roots of Harrison Properties growing up as Richard Harrison's son meant learning about real estate before I could ride a bike. Some fathers taught their kids to throw baseballs. Mine taught me to calculate property values and spot a bad foundation from 100 yards away. After Mom died of cancer when I was 10, it was just Dad and me against the world. For 3 years, we were a team. He was grooming me to take over Harrison Properties someday, and I was soaking up every lesson. Then Diana Winters came into our lives. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed to genuinely care about Dad. I was 13 when they married, old enough to be wary, but young enough to hope for a new family. Diana had 2 children from her previous marriage, Brittany, who was my age, and Tyler, 2 years younger. For a while, things were okay, not great, but okay. Diana made Dad happy, and that was what mattered to me. But slowly, things began to change. My place at the dinner table moved further from Dad. My weekend property tours with him were rescheduled to accommodate Tyler's soccer games or Brittany's dance recitals. Diana started redecorating the house, erasing traces of my mother room by room. "You need to give them a chance, Maxwell," Dad would say whenever I complained. "They're family now." By the time I was 16, I had effectively been sidelined in my own home. Diana positioned herself as Dad's business confidant, accompanying him to meetings and networking events that I used to attend. Tyler suddenly developed an interest in real estate, and Dad was thrilled. Despite this, Dad and I maintained our connection through the business. Harrison Properties was Dad's life work, a company that owned and managed nearly 30% of the commercial real estate in Maplewood and surrounding areas. What had started as a single apartment building purchase when my parents first married had grown into an empire worth millions. "Property is permanent, Maxwell," Dad often said. "Money comes and goes, but land and buildings, they're tangible. They last." I took those words to heart, studying business and real estate in college while working summers at Harrison Properties. I learned every aspect of the business, from maintenance to management to development. By the time I graduated, I was ready to step into a leadership role. That's when everything fell apart. The breaking point, and my exiled dad had been planning a major development, a mixed-use riverfront project that would revitalize Maplewood's downtown. We had spent months on the plans together. But when I returned from a trip researching similar developments in other cities, I discovered that significant changes had been made without my input. Diana and I thought a more upscale approach would yield better returns, Dad explained when I confronted him. The luxury condos will sell better than the mixed-income housing you proposed. That wasn't the vision, I argued. We talked about creating something that would benefit the whole town, not just the wealthy. "Sometimes you have to be practical, son," he said. "Diana has excellent instincts for these things." The argument escalated. 5 years of resentment poured out as I accused him of choosing his new family over me, of abandoning our shared values for Diana's materialistic vision. He accused me of being inflexible and idealistic. "Maybe you're not ready for this level of responsibility," he finally said. "Perhaps you should take some time to mature before joining the company leadership." That was the last straw. I packed my bags that night and caught a flight to Singapore, where a college friend had offered me a position in his developing firm. I vowed to prove I could succeed on my own terms, and I did. Over the next 5 years, I built a reputation for innovative, community-minded development projects across Southeast Asia. My work was featured in international business magazines. I won awards for sustainable design. I made more money than I could spend. But the rift with my father remained unhealed. Monthly calls dwindled to holiday greetings, then to nothing. I told myself he knew how to reach me if he wanted to. According to Grace, upon my return, he had tried, but Diana had intercepted his attempts. The truth revealed the morning after my arrival in Maplewood. I headed to First National Bank as soon as it opened. The safety deposit box contained exactly what I'd hoped: a folder of legal documents, property deeds, and a USB drive. I found a quiet coffee shop and plugged the drive into my laptop. It contained a video file dated 6 months ago. Dad appeared on screen, looking thin and pale, so different from the robust man I remembered. "Maxwell," he began, "if you're watching this, then you found my letter and I'm gone. First, I need to apologize. I let Diana come between us, and that's my greatest regret. But I want you to know I never stopped planning for your future." He explained that over the past 3 years, he had been quietly transferring ownership of key Harrison Properties assets directly to me. The Riverside development lands, the downtown commercial block, the apartment complexes on Maple Street, all had been legally signed over to me through a series of trusts and transfers designed to minimize tax implications. Diana doesn't know, he continued. After your argument, I realized she had more influence over me than was healthy. I saw how she was positioning Tyler to take over, despite his lack of experience or genuine interest. I couldn't let everything I built, everything I wanted for you, be squandered. My father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 2 years ago. Given a limited time, he had set his affairs in order, working with his old friend and business partner, Franklin Ross, to ensure his legacy would be protected. The will reading will be difficult, Dad warned in the video. Diana expects to control everything. The official will leave her the house and some accounts, enough to maintain her lifestyle. But the bulk of the business assets are already yours. Franklin has all the details. The video ended with my father looking directly into the camera. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, son. Now, come home and finish what we started together. I sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down my face as the screen went dark. All this time, Dad had been protecting me, protecting our shared vision, and I hadn't been there for him when he needed me most. Assembling the pieces after composing myself, I called Franklin Ross and arranged to meet him at his office. The gruff older man had been my father's friend since college and had always treated me kindly. When I arrived, he greeted me with a bear hug. About time you showed up, he said. Your dad was worried you wouldn't come back, even after he was gone. Franklin confirmed everything in the video. Dad had legally transferred ownership of the most valuable Harrison properties to me through a variety of means, some as gifts, others through sales at nominal prices, all perfectly legal and binding. Diana's going to be furious, Franklin warned. She's been making plans based on controlling those assets. She's already in talks with Lawrence Blackwood about selling the Riverside property. Lawrence Blackwood was Dad's longtime business rival, a developer known for cheaply built, overpriced properties. The thought of his hands on my father's carefully assembled portfolio made my blood boil. What about the will reading? I asked. Franklin's expression darkened. Harold Stevenson has been Diana's puppet for years. Your dad kept him as the family attorney to avoid suspicion, but he didn't trust him with the real plan. Harold scheduled the reading for this afternoon, and Diana's made it clear you're not welcome. I finger the property deeds in my briefcase. Oh, I think I'll attend anyway. Franklin's smile was wolfish. Richard would have loved this. He always said you had his flair for the dramatic moment. As I left his office, I felt my father's presence more strongly than I had since returning to Maplewood. He had entrusted me with his legacy, and I wouldn't let him down. Diana and her children were about to learn that they had underestimated both Harrison men. Unveiling the betrayal, Margaret Wilson had been my father's executive assistant for 20 years. She knew everything about Harrison Properties and everyone in Maplewood. When I walked into the company headquarters that morning, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. Maxwell Harrison, she said, rising from her desk to embrace me. I was hoping you'd come. The offices had changed, sleeker, colder, with Diana's influence evident in the decor. But Margaret's domain remained a comforting throwback, with its orderly filing cabinets and family photos, including, I noticed with a pang, several of me that Dad must have kept her supplied with over the years. Your father wanted me to give you this, Margaret said quietly, slipping me a second USB drive. He made me promise to hand it to you personally, not to mail it or leave it anywhere it might be found. I thanked her and asked about the company's current state. Margaret's expression turned troubled. Things have changed since Diana took over. Operations cost-cutting measures, staff reductions. She brought in consultants who know nothing about how your father ran things. And Tyler, she lowered her voice. Tyler has been given a VP title, but he rarely shows up, and when he does, he makes decisions that undo years of careful work. I asked about specific projects and properties, carefully not revealing what I already knew from the documents and my meeting with Franklin. Margaret's answers confirmed my suspicions. Diana had been systematically preparing to dismantle my father's carefully built empire for quick profits. The Riverside development has been completely redesigned, Margaret said. Your father's vision for a community space with affordable housing has been replaced with luxury condos and high-end retail. Lawrence Blackwood's company is set to take over construction next month. Before leaving, I asked to see my father's office. Margaret hesitated. Diana had it cleared out last week. Said she needed the space for the new marketing team. I'd still like to see it. The room that had once been filled with my father's books, his maps, his collection of local historical photographs, was now an empty shell. Standing there, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about claiming my inheritance. It was about honoring my father's vision for Maplewood. Dad's true vision, I found a quiet corner in a nearby park to view the contents of the second USB drive. This one contained more videos, my father walking through various properties, explaining their significance and his hopes for their future. He'd recorded these private messages over the last year of his life, creating a detailed blueprint of his vision. The Riverside project is the most important, he said in one recording, standing on the vacant waterfront property that had been the subject of our final argument. This could transform Maplewood, create housing and opportunities for everyone, not just the wealthy. Diana doesn't understand that a town needs economic diversity to thrive. I've transferred this property to you because I know you'll do right by it. In another video, he sat in his office, looking tired but determined. I've been watching your work in Asia, Maxwell. The sustainable housing development in Malaysia, the mixed-use project in Vietnam. You've taken what I taught you and improved on it. You were right about the direction we should have gone. I was too easily swayed by Diana's focus on luxury and status. By the time I finished watching all the videos, I had a complete understanding of not just what my father had transferred to me, but why. He had protected his most meaningful projects from Diana's influence, ensuring they would be developed according to his original vision, the vision we had once shared. The legal tightrope my next stop was to meet with James Patterson, the accountant who had handled my father's personal finances for decades. James greeted me warmly but cautiously in his small downtown office. I've been expecting you, he said, closing the door firmly behind me. Your father left instructions that I should assist you once you returned. James explained the complex financial arrangements my father had created. Not only had he transferred property ownership, but he had also established a separate business entity, Harrison Legacy Holdings, with me as the sole owner. The structure is quite elegant, James explained, showing me flowcharts and balance sheets. Diana believes she's inheriting control of Harrison Properties, but the company is now essentially a shell. The valuable assets have been moved to Harrison Legacy Holdings over the past 3 years through a series of perfectly legal transactions. Did Dad leave Diana with nothing? I asked, feeling a twinge of concern despite everything. James shook his head. He was fair. The family home is hers. There are investment accounts with substantial balances. She'll receive ongoing income from some of the commercial properties. She won't be destitute by any means, just not in control of the empire she thought she was getting. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing documents and making calls to verify my legal standing. By noon, I was confident in my position. The property deeds were valid, the business transfers were properly filed. My father had methodically ensured that his wishes would be carried out, regardless of what his official will might say. As I prepared for the will reading, scheduled for 2 p.m., I felt both nervous and resolute. Diana and her children had spent years pushing me out of my father's life, thinking they had secured their future by doing so. They had no idea what was coming. I dressed carefully in my best suit, charcoal gray with a subtle blue tie that had been a gift from my father years ago. In my briefcase, I organized the key documents I might need: property deeds, business registration papers, transfer records, evidence of my father's true intentions. Before heading to Harold Stevenson's law office, I made one last call to Grace. She had been my closest confidant since my return, and I valued her insight into how to handle the confrontation ahead. Diana's been telling everyone you abandoned your father and don't deserve anything, Grace warned me. She's been playing the devoted wife role to perfection. Be prepared for theatrics. I'm not looking to humiliate her, I said. I just want to honor Dad's wishes. Grace's silence spoke volumes. Okay, I amended. Maybe I want to humiliate her a little. Grace laughed. She deserves it. Your dad wasn't happy these last few years, Max. He missed you. Whatever happens today, remember that he wanted you to come home and take your rightful place. With those words bolstering my courage, I headed to Harold Stevenson's office, ready to face the family that had tried to erase me from my father's legacy. The showdown. Harold Stevenson's law office occupied the entire top floor of one of Maplewood's few high-rise buildings, a modest 4-story structure in the center of town. My father had actually owned the building, though I wondered if Harold knew that ownership had transferred to me 6 months ago. I arrived 5 minutes before the scheduled time, taking a moment in the lobby to center myself. This confrontation had been years in the making, though neither Diana nor her children realized it yet. The receptionist looked startled when I gave my name. Oh, Mr. Harrison. Let me check with Mr. Stevenson. She disappeared down the hallway, returning moments later with a flustered-looking Harold. Harold Stevenson had been my father's attorney for 20 years. He drafted my first will when I turned 18, had handled the paperwork when I bought my first investment property at 21. Yet now he regarded me like a stranger, worse, an intruder. Maxwell, he said, not extending his hand. This is unexpected. Today's meeting is just a small family gathering to discuss preliminary matters. I'm family, I replied simply. My father's only blood relative, in fact. Harold's discomfort was palpable. Diana felt it would be best if, given your arrangement, perhaps we could arrange a separate meeting to discuss any concerns you might have. I'll join today's meeting, I said firmly. Shall we? Without waiting for a response, I walked past him toward the conference room, where I could hear voices. Harold hurried after me, nearly tripping in his haste. When I pushed open the door, the conversation inside abruptly ceased. Diana sat at the head of the table, where my father would have sat, dressed in elegant black that complemented her ash-blonde hair. Brittany and Tyler flanked her like courtiers. A few other people were present: Dad's banker, a cousin of Diana's who had never liked me, and a man I recognized as Lawrence Blackwood's attorney. Diana recovered first. Maxwell, this is a surprise. Her tone suggested it was not a pleasant one. I came to hear my father's will, I said, taking a seat directly opposite her. Harold hovered uncertainly at the door. Diana, I wasn't aware Maxwell would be joining us. Diana's perfectly made-up face hardened. This meeting is for heirs only, she said coldly. Maxwell removed himself from this family years ago. I said nothing, simply opening my briefcase and removing a folder of documents. I think we should begin, Harold said, taking his seat and arranging his papers. We're here for the reading of Richard Harrison's last will and testament. As Harold began reading the formal legal preamble, I studied the faces around the table. Diana maintained a mask of somber dignity, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Tyler looked bored, checking his watch repeatedly. Only Brittany showed any genuine emotion, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. To my wife, Diana, Harold read. I leave our family home at 247 Maple Avenue, its contents, and the sum of $2 million. Diana nodded as if this were exactly what she expected. I noticed she didn't seem surprised or particularly grateful. This was clearly the minimum she had anticipated. To my stepdaughter, Brittany, I leave the sum of $1 million and my collection of first edition books. Brittany looked up in surprise at this last part. My father's book collection had been his pride, carefully assembled over decades. I was startled too. This didn't align with the plans Dad had shared with me, but I remained silent, waiting. To my stepson, Tyler, I leave the sum of $1 million in my vintage car collection. Tyler smirked. Dad's cars were worth a considerable amount. The 1965 Mustang alone was valued at over $100,000. As to my business interests, Harold continued, Harrison Properties and all associated assets I leave to? Diana straightened, a triumphant gleam in her eye. My son, Maxwell Harrison. The room went deathly quiet. Then Diana laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. That's impossible, she said. Richard changed his will 2 years ago. I was there. Harold looked profoundly uncomfortable. There was a codicil filed 6 months ago, he admitted. It reversed the previous changes. Diana's face flushed with anger. You never mentioned this. I wasn't aware of it until yesterday. Harold said weakly. It was filed with the court, directly by Richard. I received the official copy yesterday afternoon. It doesn't matter, Diana said dismissively. Harrison Properties' assets are what matter, and I've been running the company for the past year. The board will never accept Maxwell's leadership after he abandoned his responsibilities. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I placed the property deeds on the table, sliding them toward the center where everyone could see. These are the deeds to the Riverside Development property, the downtown commercial block, the Maple Street apartments, and 12 other key properties, I said calmly. You'll notice they're all in my name. Have been for some time. Diana snatched up the papers, her hands shaking as she flipped through them. These must be forgeries. They're not, I said. Dad transferred ownership to me legally over the past 3 years. You can verify with the county recorder's office. You mean the properties I already own? I added, unable to resist the dramatic flourish my father would have appreciated. Tyler jumped to his feet. You can't just come back after 5 years and take everything. I'm not taking anything, I replied evenly. I'm claiming what already belongs to me. What Dad wanted me to have. Diana's face had gone from flushed to ashen. Harold, is this legal? Can he do this? Harold, who was examining copies of the deeds with a stunned expression, nodded reluctantly. The transfers appear legitimate. If Richard signed these properties over while he was alive, they wouldn't be part of the estate. What about Harrison Properties? Diana demanded. The will says Maxwell gets the company. The company assets are primarily the properties, Harold explained, looking increasingly miserable. If the properties are already in Maxwell's name, then the company itself is a shell. I finished for him. Dad also established Harrison Legacy Holdings last year, transferring operational control of all these properties to the new entity. I'm the sole owner. The room erupted into chaos. Tyler was shouting about contesting the will. Diana was threatening to sue everyone, including Harold. Brittany sat silently, watching me with an unreadable expression. When Diana finally ran out of steam, I spoke again, my voice quiet but firm. Dad left you financially secure, Diana. The house, investments, some income properties. He wasn't vindictive, but he built Harrison Properties from nothing, and he wanted its legacy protected. He knew you planned to sell it off piece by piece. You have no right, Diana hissed. I was his wife. I took care of him while you were off playing developer in Asia. I wanted to come back, I said. I called for months after I left. You told me he didn't want to speak to me. A flicker of guilt crossed Diana's face before she masked it. He was disappointed in you. Then why did he leave me everything that mattered to him? I challenged. Why did he spend the last years of his life creating an elaborate plan to ensure I would carry on his work? Brittany spoke for the first time. Is it true? Did Mom keep you from talking to Dad? Before Diana could interrupt, I nodded. According to his videos and letters, yes. He tried to reach me multiple times. Videos? Diana's voice rose in panic. What videos? I patted my briefcase. Dad was thorough. He documented everything. His decisions, his reasons, his hopes for the future of the business in Maplewood. He knew exactly what you were planning, Diana. The deal with Lawrence Blackwood, the luxury condos on the riverside. All of it. Harold cleared his throat. Perhaps we should adjourn for today. This is a lot to process, and there may be legal questions that need resolving. I agree, I said, rising and gathering my documents. My attorneys will be in touch regarding the transition of operational control for the properties. In the meantime, I'd appreciate it if no further business decisions are made without my approval. As I turned to leave, Diana called after me, her voice laced with venom. This isn't over, Maxwell. Your father wasn't in his right mind toward the end. We'll contest everything. I paused at the door. You're welcome to try. But Dad didn't just leave me property and a company, Diana. He left me the truth. Are you sure you want that made public? The threat hung in the air as I walked out, my heart pounding, but my step lighter than it had been in years. I had honored my father's wishes. Now came the hard part, rebuilding what Diana had tried to dismantle and fulfilling the vision my father and I had once shared. Reclaiming a legacy the morning after the will reading, Maplewood was buzzing with gossip. In a small town like ours, news traveled faster than the internet. By the time I stopped at Bernard's Bakery for coffee, I had received a dozen curious stares and several congratulatory nods from old-timers who'd known my father for decades. Your dad would be mighty pleased, said Bernard himself, as he handed me a cinnamon roll on the house. Diana had folks worried about what would happen to the town if she sold everything to outsiders. I thanked him and took a seat by the window, watching the familiar rhythm of Main Street. Maplewood had changed less than I had in 5 years. The same shops lined the street, the same courthouse stood at the end of the square, the same sense of community persisted despite Diana's best efforts to remake it in her image. Grace joined me, sliding into the seat across from mine without invitation. You're the talk of the town, she said, stealing a piece of my cinnamon roll. Diana's telling anyone who'll listen that you manipulated your father in his final days and that she'll see you in court. Let her try, I replied. Dad documented everything. He was of sound mind and body when he made these arrangements. Grace's expression turned serious. Be careful. Max Diana has a lot of influential friends, and Lawrence Blackwood is furious about losing the Riverside deal. I was saved from responding by the arrival of Franklin Ross, who pulled up a chair without asking. Morning, kids, he said, though Grace and I were both in our 30s. Quite a show yesterday, from what I hear. I filled him in on the details, including Diana's threats of litigation. Franklin waved this off. Standard bluster. Her legal position is weak, and she knows it, but that doesn't mean she won't make trouble. What kind of trouble? I asked. The community kind, Franklin replied. Diana spent the last 5 years building social capital in this town, charity boards, business associations, the works. She's convinced a lot of people that her vision for Maplewood's development is the right one. Selling everything to Lawrence Blackwood is hardly a vision, I countered. People don't know that part, Grace pointed out. They just see the glossy renderings of riverfront dining and luxury boutiques. They don't understand what it would mean for housing prices or the character of the town. I spent the rest of the day meeting with key employees at Harrison Properties, reassuring them about their jobs and my intentions for the company. Most seemed relieved. Diana's management style had apparently involved a lot of threatening to fire people. But a few who had aligned themselves with her were noticeably cold. Margaret had organized the files I needed to review, giving me a comprehensive picture of the company's current state. It wasn't pretty. Cash reserves had been depleted. Maintenance on properties had been deferred. Several valuable parcels of land had been prepared for quick sales at below-market rates. She was stripping the company for parts, Margaret said bluntly. If you hadn't come back when you did, the implications were clear. A few more months, and Diana might have done irreparable damage to my father's legacy. Unexpected allies and new revelations that evening, I returned to the house, Diana's house now legally, though I was still staying in the guest room until I found more permanent accommodations. The atmosphere was glacial. Diana had retreated to the master suite, emerging only to glare at me when our paths crossed in the hallway. Tyler was openly hostile, slamming doors and muttering threats under his breath. But it was Brittany who surprised me, knocking tentatively on my door after dinner. Can we talk? She asked, looking uncomfortable but determined. I invited her in, curious about what she wanted. Brittany and I had never been close. She had followed her mother's lead in freezing me out of family activities from the beginning, but we had never been outright enemies either. She perched awkwardly on the edge of a chair. I wanted to apologize, she said after a moment of silence, for how things went with Dad, with Richard. I raised an eyebrow at her use of his name rather than Dad. He was always your dad more than ours, she acknowledged. Tyler pretended to be interested in the business, but it was all an act. He just wanted the money and status. And you? I asked. Brittany sighed. I just wanted a family. When Mom married Richard, I thought we'd all become one big happy unit. But she was always pushing, positioning Tyler, and excluding you. It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to stop it. Her confession seemed genuine, but I remained wary. Why are you telling me this now? Because I found something, she said, pulling a small notebook from her pocket. After the will reading, I was curious about what Dad, Richard, was really thinking, so I went through some of his things that Mom had packed away. She handed me the notebook. It was my father's journal from the past year, filled with his thoughts about the business, his illness, and his family, including his regrets about our estrangement and his growing concerns about Diana's influence. He wasn't happy, Brittany said quietly. He missed you, and he was starting to see through Mom's manipulations. I flipped through the pages, recognizing my father's handwriting and his characteristic blunt assessments. There were detailed notes about Diana's meetings with Lawrence Blackwood, her efforts to isolate Richard from old friends, her pressure to change his will. Does your mother know you have this? I asked. Brittany shook her head. She'd be furious, but I thought you should have it. It confirms what you said about Dad wanting you to come home and take over. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Why show me this? You're basically giving me ammunition against your mother. Because it's the right thing to do, she said simply. And because I want to stay in Maplewood. I love this town. I don't want to see it destroyed by Mom's schemes or by a family war. Before I could respond, shouting erupted from downstairs. We hurried down to find Tyler and Diana in a heated argument with an unfamiliar woman who bore a striking resemblance to my father. You have no right to be here, Diana was saying, her voice shrill. Richard never acknowledged you. The woman noticed me on the stairs, and her expression changed. You must be Maxwell, she said. I'm Alice. Alice Thornton. Richard was my father, too. The half-sister I never knew existed. Another bombshell in a week full of them. That's a lie. Diana snapped. Some desperate ploy for money. Alice shook her head. I don't want money. Richard and I had a relationship for years, private at my request. I just came to pay my respects and meet my brother. She extended a hand toward me, her eyes so like my father's, cautious but hopeful. I took it, feeling another piece of the puzzle that was Richard Harrison's life fall into place. It seems we have a lot to talk about. Diana made a sound of disgust. I won't stand here and watch this farce. Come on, Tyler. She stormed out, Tyler trailing behind her. Brittany hesitated, then quietly slipped away, leaving me alone with a sister I never knew I had. Alice smiled tentatively. This isn't how I imagined our first meeting. Nothing about this week has gone as imagined, I replied with a rueful laugh. But I'd like to hear about you and your relationship with Dad, if you're willing to share. We moved to the living room, and Alice began telling me about her mother's brief relationship with my father before he met my mother, how she had discovered her paternity as an adult, and how Dad had welcomed her into his life quietly, respecting her wishes for privacy. He talked about you all the time, she said. He was so proud of what you were accomplishing in Asia, even while he missed you terribly. As Alice spoke, I felt both grief and gratitude washing over me, grief for the years lost to my father, and gratitude that he had found ways to protect his legacy despite Diana's interference. The road ahead would be challenging, with Diana's threatened lawsuits and the community divisions Franklin had warned about, but I was more determined than ever to honor my father's vision for Harrison Properties. And for Maplewood itself, the path forward later that night, as I pored over company documents in the guest room, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Lawrence Blackwood. We need to talk. This isn't over. I stared at the message, understanding that the battle for my father's legacy and Maplewood's future was just beginning. The weeks following the will reading were a whirlwind of activity. I officially took control of Harrison Properties, working with Margaret to assess the damage Diana had done and develop a recovery plan. The employees largely rallied around me, relieved to have clear leadership again after months of Diana's chaotic management. Your father would be proud, Margaret told me as we reviewed the updated business plan. This is exactly the steady hand the company needs. Not everyone was pleased with my return. Several board members, who had aligned themselves with Diana, resigned in protest. Lawrence Blackwood launched a public relations campaign, suggesting that an absentee heir couldn't possibly understand Maplewood's needs the way his development company could. The most surprising development came from Diana herself. After weeks of threats and posturing, she unexpectedly requested a meeting at her attorney's office. Be careful, Franklin warned when I told him about it. Diana doesn't make conciliatory gestures unless she has an angle. I agreed to meet her, curious about what she could possibly offer that would interest me. Grace insisted on accompanying me as moral support, waiting in the lobby while I faced Diana and her attorney. Diana looked immaculate as always, but there was a brittleness to her perfect appearance that hadn't been there before. The stress of the past month had taken a toll. I want to propose a settlement, she said without preamble, to avoid costly litigation and public spectacle. Her attorney, a sharp-faced woman I didn't recognize, placed a document on the table between us. Mrs. Harrison is willing to withdraw all claims against the estate and property transfers in exchange for operational control of the Riverside Development Project. I nearly laughed out loud. The most valuable property in the portfolio. That's not a settlement, that's a heist. It was my idea. Diana insisted. I worked with Richard on the plans for years. That project is my vision. It was Dad's vision long before you came into the picture. I corrected her. And it wasn't luxury condos and boutiques. It was affordable housing, community spaces, local businesses. Diana's facade cracked slightly. Maplewood needs to evolve, Maxwell. The old way of doing things is dying. Richard understood that toward the end. Did he? I asked, pulling out my phone and playing one of Dad's videos, the one where he explicitly stated that Diana didn't understand his true vision for the Riverside property. Diana's face flushed with anger. He was sick, confused. He was clear-minded enough to legally transfer his most important assets to me, I pointed out, and to document why he was doing it. The meeting ended at an impasse, with Diana storming out and her attorney promising further legal action. But as the weeks passed, no lawsuit materialized. According to Franklin's sources, Diana's attorneys had advised her that her position was legally untenable. Building a new Maplewood meanwhile, I had been getting to know my half-sister Alice. Unlike Diana's children, Alice had no interest in the family business. She was a professor of environmental science at a university in Colorado, passionate about conservation and sustainability. Our conversations gave me ideas for incorporating green spaces and sustainable design into the Riverside development. Dad would have loved that, Alice said when I shared my updated vision for the project. He was always interested in environmental initiatives, but Diana discouraged them as too costly. Brittany had become an unexpected ally in navigating the transition. She had distanced herself from Diana's machinations, moving into an apartment downtown and offering insights into her mother's business dealings that proved invaluable. Mom's been liquidating her personal assets, she informed me during one of our regular coffee meetings. Selling jewelry, art, even some of her designer furniture. I think she's planning to leave Maplewood. Tyler remained hostile, but increasingly isolated. His friends in town had begun to distance themselves as rumors of his involvement in some of Diana's more questionable business decisions circulated. The real breakthrough came during a town council meeting where I presented my revised plans for the Riverside development. Gone were Diana's luxury condos and exclusive shops, replaced with a mixed-use development that included affordable housing, spaces for local businesses, a community center, and extensive public access to the waterfront. This is the development my father originally envisioned, I explained to the packed meeting room. A project that would benefit all of Maplewood, not just the wealthy few. Lawrence Blackwood was there, of course, armed with his own glossy presentation and promises of tax revenue from his high-end development. But when residents began asking questions about housing affordability and public access, his proposal quickly lost support. The Harrison Plan preserves Maplewood's character while allowing for growth, Grace argued from the audience. The Blackwood Plan turns us into just another playground for the rich. The council voted unanimously to support my proposal, dealing a decisive blow to both Lawrence and Diana's vision for Maplewood's future. As I left the meeting, Lawrence approached me, his expression grim but resigned. "You win this round, Harrison," he said. "But I've been in this business a lot longer than you. I can wait. Or you could adapt," I suggested. "There's room for your company in my development plan if you're willing to work within the community-focused framework." Lawrence seemed startled by the offer. "Why would you suggest that?" "Because despite everything, you're good at what you do," I acknowledged. "And Dad always said that a smart businessman can find a way to do well by doing good." We didn't reach an agreement that night, but the door had been opened. Sometimes reconciliation comes from unexpected directions. A new chapter, the final confrontation with Diana, came not in a courtroom, but in the garden of what had once been our family home. I found her there one evening when I came to collect the last of my belongings before moving into my own place. She was sitting on a stone bench near my mother's rose bushes, looking smaller and older than I remembered. When she saw me, she didn't lash out as I expected. "I'm leaving Maplewood," she said simply. "There's nothing for me here anymore." I sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. "Where will you go?" "Back to Connecticut. My sister is there." She glanced at me sideways. "You've won, Maxwell. The company, the town's support, even my daughter's loyalty. Are you satisfied?" The question wasn't entirely bitter. There was genuine curiosity in it. "It was never about winning," I said after a moment. "It was about honoring Dad's legacy. About doing right by Maplewood." Diana was quiet for a long moment. "He changed after you left," she finally said. "Became more distant, more focused on his projects. I thought if I took an interest in the business, it would bring us closer. And then you got a taste for it," I suggested. She didn't deny it. "I'm not apologizing for wanting security, Maxwell. When you've been left with nothing once in your life, you do whatever it takes to make sure it never happens again." I thought about the complex woman beside me, manipulative and materialistic, yes, but also shaped by her own fears and experiences. Dad left you financially secure. The house, the investments. You didn't need to try to take everything. "Need has little to do with it," she replied with unexpected frankness. "But it's done now." She stood, straightening her shoulders. "I've instructed my attorney to withdraw all objections to the will and property transfers. In return, I expect you to honor the provisions Dad made for me and my children." I never planned to contest those, I assured her. She nodded once, a businesslike conclusion to our relationship. Goodbye, Maxwell. I doubt we'll see each other again. As Diana walked away, I felt not triumph, but a strange mix of relief and sadness. The family I had once hoped for when Dad remarried had never materialized, but in its place, new connections had formed. With Alice, with Brittany, with a community of Maplewood that had welcomed me home. Legacy and love. The next morning, I met with the Harrison Properties team to officially launch the Riverside Development Project. As I looked around the conference room at the eager faces, including Brittany, who had recently joined the marketing department, I felt my father's presence strongly. My father used to say that property is permanence, I told the team. What we build here will outlast all of us. So let's make sure it's something Maplewood can be proud of for generations to come. As the meeting broke up, Grace approached me with a smile. Your dad would be really proud, Max. I nodded, feeling at peace for the first time since returning to Maplewood. I think he would, and I think this is just the beginning. 1 year after my return to Maplewood, I stood on the newly constructed observation deck overlooking the Riverside development. What had once been vacant land was now a bustling construction site, with the first phase of buildings already taking shape. Mixed-income housing units flanked a central green space, while the foundations for the community center and local business incubator were being laid closer to the water. Quite a view, said Franklin, joining me at the railing. Richard would have loved this. I nodded, thinking of my father's vision for this property and how close it had come to becoming something entirely different. I wish he could see it. He can, Franklin said simply, pointing to a bronze plaque we had installed at the entrance to the development. Richard Harrison Memorial Park would be the centerpiece of the project, ensuring that my father's contribution to Maplewood would be remembered. The past year had been transformative, both for Harrison Properties and for me personally. Taking control of my father's company had forced me to put down roots in a way I'd avoided for years, to engage with the community not just as a developer, but as a citizen with a stake in its future. The scholarship committee approved all 15 applications, Alice informed me, consulting her tablet as she approached. My half-sister had moved to Maplewood 6 months ago to help establish the Richard Harrison Foundation, which provided educational opportunities for local students interested in sustainable development and community planning. Perfect, I replied, and the internship program launches next month. We got partnerships with 3 colleges already. Alice had become an integral part of my life, bridging the gap between my past and present. Through her, I learned stories about our father I'd never known. His quiet environmental activism, his anonymous support for students who couldn't afford college, his mentorship of young entrepreneurs. He never wanted recognition, Alice explained once. He just wanted to make things better. In that spirit, I had redirected Harrison Properties toward development that balanced profit with community benefit. It wasn't always easy. Lawrence Blackwood and his allies on the Business Council frequently opposed our more progressive initiatives, but we were making progress. Surprisingly, it was Brittany who often helped navigate these political waters. Having grown up watching Diana charm and manipulate her way through Maplewood society, Brittany had developed a keen understanding of the town's social dynamics. Lawrence is planning to speak against the affordable housing expansion at next week's council meeting, she warned me as we walked back to the office. He's been lobbying council members behind the scenes. Any suggestions? I asked, having learned to value her strategic thinking. Brittany smiled. I've already arranged for residents from the first phase to attend and share their stories. Lawrence can argue with us, but he can't argue with families who now have stable housing because of the development. Back at Harrison Properties headquarters, I found Margaret waiting with a stack of documents requiring my signature. Among them was the final paperwork, severing Diana's remaining connections to the company. She had agreed to sell her minority shares in exchange for a lump sum payment. Have you heard from her? Margaret asked as I signed the forms. Not directly, I admitted. Brittany says she's remarried and living in Greenwich. Apparently, she's joined the board of an art museum and is busy reinventing herself as a philanthropist. I harbored no ill will toward Diana anymore. She had acted according to her nature, just as my father had ultimately acted according to his, by ensuring his legacy would be protected. The Richard Harrison I had come to know through his videos, journals, and the stories others shared was more complex than the father I thought I knew, more strategic, more farsighted, more forgiving of human weakness. You've got dinner with Grace at 7, Margaret reminded me as I handed back the signed documents. And don't forget the Historical Society wants an answer about the old mill property by tomorrow. I thanked her and headed to my office, my father's old office, which I'd restored to something resembling its former state with the addition of my own touches. The Monte Cristo painting hung in its original place, though the hidden key was long gone. Photographs lined the shelves, not just of me and Dad, but now including Alice, Brittany, Grace, and other important people in my life. The most meaningful addition was a simple framed note that had been among my father's personal effects. Property is permanence, but legacy is in people. R.H. I'd made peace with Tyler as well, in a manner of speaking. After several months of hostility, He had finally approached me with a business proposition. He wanted to open a high-end restaurant in one of the Harrison Properties buildings downtown. Against Margaret's advice, I had agreed, offering favorable lease terms. "He'll mess it up," Margaret predicted darkly. "He has no work ethic." But surprisingly, Tyler's restaurant had become a success. He had found his passion in the culinary world, something Diana had apparently always discouraged as beneath their social status. While we would never be close, we had reached a civil understanding. As the sun began to set over the river, I made a final call to check on the status of the memorial scholarship named for my mother. This had been one of my first initiatives upon taking control of the company, creating a fund for young women pursuing careers in architecture, my mother's unfulfilled dream. The first recipients graduate next spring, the program administrator informed me. They're already asking about internship opportunities with Harrison Properties. After hanging up, I took a moment to reflect on how far I'd come since that rainy day in Singapore when I'd received the news of my father's death. I had returned to Maplewood angry and hurt, focused on claiming what was rightfully mine. Somewhere along the way, that mission had transformed into something larger, honoring not just my inheritance, but the responsibility that came with it. The confrontation at the will reading, my dramatic moment of placing the property deeds on the table, now seemed like a lifetime ago. It had been satisfying, yes, but the real satisfaction came from what followed. The relationships rebuilt, the community strengthened, the legacy secured. The true inheritance Grace was waiting for me at our favorite restaurant, her smile warming as I approached. Our friendship had deepened over the past year, gradually evolving into something more. She had been my anchor through the tumultuous transition, my guide to the Maplewood that had evolved during my absence, and eventually, my partner in both business and life. "The riverside lookout is spectacular," I told her as we settled at our table. "You should see the sunset from up there." "Show me after dinner," she suggested. I nodded, already planning to bring champagne. The ring I'd purchased last week was burning a hole in my pocket, waiting for the perfect moment. As we enjoyed our meal, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me here. The inheritance I had fought for had turned out to be so much more than property deeds and business assets. It was a chance to reconcile with my past, to forge new connections, to build something meaningful on the foundation my father had created. The real estate deeds I had dramatically presented at the will reading had been important, yes. They had given me legal control of my father's legacy. But the true inheritance was the vision and values he had instilled in me, the lessons about community and responsibility that had shaped my approach to development, even during our years apart. Diana had never understood that. She had seen the properties as assets to be leveraged, the business as a source of wealth and status. She had missed the deeper purpose that had driven my father throughout his life. As Grace and I walked along the riverfront after dinner, hand in hand in the gathering twilight, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for my father's foresight, for the second chance at belonging in Maplewood, for the opportunity to build something that would outlast me. "What are you thinking about?" Grace asked, noticing my contemplative mood. "Legacy," I replied. "What we leave behind. How we're remembered." She squeezed my hand. "Your dad would be proud of what you've done here. What you're still doing." I nodded, thinking of the complex, imperfect, ultimately loving father I had come to know better in death than I sometimes had in life. He had made mistakes, we all did, but in the end, he had done his best to protect what mattered most. As we reached the observation deck, overlooking the project that would define Maplewood's future, I knew it was time. The ring box felt heavy in my pocket, but my heart was light. Whatever came next, I was exactly where I was meant to be, building on my father's legacy while creating my own. So what about you? Have you ever had to stand up for what was rightfully yours against people who tried to take advantage? Or have you experienced a moment where you had to choose between justice and reconciliation? Tell me what you think. I really want to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story of inheritance drama and family redemption, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will make you think about legacy, family, and what truly matters in life. Thank you for watching.